Today, I want to kind of just go off script and talk about something that I think is very important, but is not talked about at all, especially in practice, what I've seen in the research, and that's the mental health of patients who have had a stroke. And the research that I looked at especially shows that a lot of times, I myself have been guilty of it. A lot of other therapists, doctors, nurses have as well. They tend to focus on the physical, right? Like physical rehab after a stroke. Let's get you walking again. Let's get you going and doing your activities of daily living again, like learning to put on a bra, or let's get you going to get in and out of a car, or to go live your life again, right? But what about our mental health, right? Well, here's kind of my perspective, right? And it's my limited perspective. It's only from what I've seen working with patients who have had a stroke and my own experience with my own mental health. So even though I haven't personally have had a stroke before, a lot of kind of like what I've gathered in my experiences, I think can really help put things into perspective. So just to put things really simple, it's life sucks. Life can suck. Life can be hard. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it, like life after a stroke can be really, really hard. You're learning to do a lot of things and it can be very hard, right? So that can put a lot on you in terms of your mental health. And a lot of times what I see in practice, what we talk about in team meetings is patients, even though they're not officially diagnosed with this, is they're having a lot of trouble with adjustment to their new disability. And even in the research, it shows that people who've had stroke, those who have high incidences demonstrating that they have anxiety and or depression and or adjustment or any of these things that are negative for their mental health, they have worse outcomes basically in terms of recovery. So that kind of makes sense. It's like if you aren't doing so well mentally, as a stroke has been a condition that has affected your brain, then you're not going to be able to even be motivated to do as much. Right? So just to tell you guys like a really funny story is, I was working with this man, an older man, gentleman, and he wanted to learn to get dressed again, and we practiced, I think it was like putting on a shirt or something. And we practiced and he was just having a lot of trouble. Some of you may have trouble, right, with this exact same thing. And it's actually quite common after a stroke actually to have trouble not only physically putting on clothes, but actually like figuring out like the nuances. And working with this gentleman, he was like, you know what, Jeff, I think I'm just going to call it quits. I'm just going to join a nudist colony. So stroke recovery is hard. And unfortunately, I don't think anybody really talks about this, especially patients. I don't know how much. A lot of times it's not addressed. Maybe it's because some therapists are uncomfortable with it. Some patients are just don't want to maybe open up and talk about it. Or just we have so much to do. Like I myself as an occupational therapist, we have a lot of boxes to check off. But just taking a step back and thinking holistically back to our practice and being just patient-centered and what the patient is all about. It can just be as little bit as helping with someone overcome or find ways to cope with their mental health that can make their recovery so much better. And just because it's a lifelong thing, like recovery from a stroke. It's not like you go to rehab for like 2 weeks or a month or like a year and then you're all better, right? You're going to slowly recover. And so a lot of this depends on how well you can cope with your mental health. So one thing that I think, first point, I guess, is you're not alone. And you're not the only one who's had a stroke. Many people before you have had a stroke before. There's a whole community of people who are supportive and supporting each other who've had a stroke, either online or local groups. Stroke is very well studied. There's a lot of research out there that shows what works, what doesn't. It's not like we know everything about a stroke and like how to fix someone and make them completely better. And that's point number 2 is that everybody's different. Everybody's stroke is different. And if you think about it, no two brains, just like how like DNA is like, are alike. Like I just did a Google search, the determinants of health from the World Health Organization can be the social, economic environment, the person's physical environment, the person's individual characteristics. There's just so much. Income, I think I talked about, education, your environment, as in like clean air, how safe is your house or the roads that you live in? How much social support do you have? Your genetics, which you cannot necessarily change, right? Health services that are available. And even something like your gender can make your outcomes so much different than the other gender. There's a lot basically that you can control and a lot that you cannot control. And one of the things that you can control is your mental health. There's the patients that are like really gung-ho about recovery and they're like doing really well. They seem to be like really resilient. They're like always up for bed and ready for therapy. You know, like they're like the star patients, right? And they do all your homework that you give them. They're like always doing the exercises. When I walk into the room, they're like always doing something and like just on top of their game, right? And then there's the other end of the spectrum, right? And you may be one of these people. And not that basically these people are like separate. Like you could be one day like the top of the game person and then the other day someone who may be like very depressed or not really motivated to go and do things in therapy. Maybe you want to just lay in bed or be left alone. Right? Nothing necessarily wrong with that. There are people that experience both of these kinds of things, these type of experiences and the good and the bad. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally natural. I think that's a totally natural human experience. Now, the struggle and the challenge comes when you're feeling down and you don't want to get out of bed or you just feel really depressed, maybe even suicidal. And then it's, what do you do with those kind of thoughts, right? And, you know, like I don't have the magic answer, but one thing that has really helped me is basically thinking about even myself personally, like what has helped me, like I'm thinking back on days that I don't want to get out of bed or like go and like film a YouTube video, go to work, do the dishes, whatever, right? It's thinking about what my values are, not necessarily even my goals. And this aligns really well for those of you who are familiar with ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. It's what things do you value? And why am I a fan of that over what your goals are? Because some people may not have goals, or some people may achieve their goals and then they feel like really empty and they don't know what to do next. Whereas values, they really persist over time. So maybe for you, the stroke survivor, maybe you value spending time with your loved ones, your family. Maybe you want to spend more time with your grandchildren. Maybe you really value traveling and seeing the world or whatever, right? There's like so many things that people value. And what's cool about values is they don't change over time, at least like generally they don't. And they're really strong kind of feelings or desires or things that people want to do that can follow along with values. So for me, for example, personally, when I have like a really like feeling really down, really blue on some days, I don't want to do much. I value spending a lot of time with my 2-year-old and giving him the best life that he can and being the best father I can. And just that kind of thought or remembering that alone can help me overcome so much to even just get out of bed and like get the day started. And then it kind of just pushes me further and further along. I guess what I'm trying to say is after you had a stroke, yeah, you can be really down about like your body. It doesn't do what you want to do. Maybe you have trouble speaking or understanding people. Maybe you have trouble thinking in terms of like being so quick on your feet. Maybe you're really used to doing that and being like that. And then all of a sudden, like you're just so much more slower. Maybe you're just really tired. You always seem sleepy. Maybe things, when you're talking, things like your words don't come out. Just like how I'm having trouble right now, right? On camera. Or whatever it is. And the trap is to get really caught up in it and ruminate on these negative things. And one strategy such as cognitive behavioral therapy is to kind of change these negative things, these thoughts, like what are they, right? And to turn them around. Personally, I don't think that has worked for me because I just think it takes so much like mental gymnastics to turn something around and to like just recognize these negative things. Whereas I think it's just more intuitive. I think especially after a stroke, for most people, what they'll find is just to, at the end of the day, focus on what their values are. And then next, what can you do? What are the steps that you can take to achieve and maybe the goals that align with those values? Now, it's not going to be like one day, right? Like you wake up and you're going to do something and then you're going to achieve that, right? Even like a goal, for example, can take many, many days, right? If you want to run a marathon, you're going to have to work up to it, run like very, very small, like trials or whatever you call it, and then work your way up to that and then build your endurance and strength for that task, right? Same thing with stroke. It takes a lot of repetition. So hopefully in me making this video, I hope that it can help a lot of you kind of realize that a lot of people out there, yeah, you see that they're recovering from stroke, and maybe they're like, if it's like on social media, like you see them finally do something like pick up and feed themselves, or go and like play a sport, or go and walk to the bathroom, or go out and like hang out and socialize, or whatever it is, right? But you're only seeing those persons like final successes, right? Kind of like the magic of video editing. You don't see their struggles. Like maybe they're having a really tough time most of the time, So what really matters is what is your values and what success is and means to you. For a therapist, it may mean, like a physical therapist, it may mean walking from point A to point B. For an occupational therapist, it may mean seeing you get dressed or seeing you go work around in the kitchen. But if they don't ask you what your values are, what your goals are, then they aren't really being holistic to you. And it could mean, maybe I want to be happy, right? That's a pretty common one. Maybe I don't want to feel so down about myself. And while that is a natural thing that we all want to do, we all want to naturally be happy. So instead of focusing on like, trying to get rid of emotions, or trying to get rid of your negativity, or being able to overcome those things, focus more on, and your energy on, what your values are. And I can't really necessarily say or give specific examples because that's really unique to you. So what may help is to maybe reflect and really take some time, maybe even write down what your values are and put it on paper and just read it and seeing, wow, those things are the most important things, not achieving a certain goal to check off the box for like therapy or even for yourself. I hope that makes sense. And let me know what you guys think about what I've said. Does it really make sense? Do you think it can really help you in your recovery? Those of you who have had a stroke, you've had your tough days, right? How did you overcome them? Give us all some tips and some of your insights into how your journey was with your stroke. And last thing is, don't let anybody tell you no. Don't let a doctor tell you that you're not going to walk again, or a therapist tell you that, yeah, it's probably not going to likely to be happening. Like, you never know. So again, focus on what your values are, and then maybe there are goals that kind of come from that, and then focus on that. At the end of the day, I think you will all do really, really well. So good luck in your recovery. It's going to be a struggle, but keep at it. Have a nice day, and thank you for watching.